Dwayne The Rock Johnson is Black Adam, DC's newest film. Went to go see it. Welcome to my non-spoiler review of Black Adam, directed by Jaime Collet Serra, starring alongside The Rock, Aldous Hodge, Noah Centineo, Sarah Saani, and Pierce Brosnan in what has to be his biggest payday since the Bond films. So the Black Adam movie is one that's been somewhat marred in controversy because for years it's something The Rock talked about even before the DCEU was a thing. I remember hearing Rock talk about playing Black Adam like it has to be over 10 years ago. That's been like a talk for a while. And for a long time the movie was kind of like in developmental hell. Like, were we going to get it? There was talk of like Black Adam being the main villain in the Shazam movie, and then that didn't happen. And there was a rumor that Black Adam would come out before Shazam, but not be tied into it. And now we have what actually happened, which is that Black Adam is a bit of a soft spin-off to Shazam in the same universe, of course, with some really interesting cameos from actors and characters I was not expecting in the same universe, teasing an eventual team up or an eventual crossover event down the road. But what they chose to do, and really it was Dwayne Johnson's call, is to give Black Adam his own story, because he does have a rich history. He does create a new sense of lore. He does create a different but connected backstory to Shazam. And ultimately, I thought it was a pretty wise decision to do because Black Adam turned out to be a hell of a fun ride. So right now, if I'm looking at the theatrical landscape, we're not talking about Disney Plus or HBO Max. We're not talking about that. Just what's in theaters. Marvel is behind DC in 2022, my friends, because all we have from DC is The Batman, which was phenomenal, and Black Adams, which was freaking amazing. And on the other side, we've got Thor Love and Thunder and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, both of which were, in my opinion, just not as good as not only their predecessors to a degree, but not as good as Black Adam or Batman or The Batman. I loved Black Adam. Now, let me tell you about this movie without going into spoilers. So, brief plot synopsis, very brief, no spoilers. A team of Tomb Raiders discovered this ancient tomb that houses a secret power, and once that power is unleashed on the earth, there is a premonition of doom to come. But as the film progresses, we find out that perhaps our idea of what is evil and what is good could be muddled by some historical inaccuracies. And that's really the story here. What is the truth? That's one of the themes of the film. So, first of all, the movie has a great backstory. I really enjoyed the backstory, going back to the ancient kings of Kandak, which is, I believe that's a fictional town. It's supposed to be somewhere in the Middle East. It's not a city that actually exists, but it represents somewhere in like the, maybe the Palestinian, Saudi Arabian region of the world. And there's a rich history there of corruption and of rebellion, which ties into the lore of the wizards that was introduced to us in the Shazam film, which would, of course, lead into the unleashing of Black Adam upon the world. So there are some things about this movie that I loved. I actually loved the movie for the most part, but there are some things that I must criticize, okay? There are some things that weren't perfect. It's not a perfect movie. First of all, the plot of the movie, I felt, was very predictable. Rock plays a fish out of water, ancient hero slash anti-hero or whatever you want to call it. And it's somewhat predictable. He doesn't really understand how modern customs work. He doesn't really understand his own power. It kind of reminds me of Arnold in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, where he has to be taught kind of what flies now compared to what flew, 5,000 years ago. Also, the predictability aspect does leave me in the sense of where some of the twists later in the film I thought were a little bit, like I saw them coming. Now, I want to clarify this real quick by saying that just because a film is predictable does not mean it's bad. A lot of the great stories that have been told to us, you can predict what's coming a mile away. What makes them great is the interactions from the characters and the execution. A lot of these superhero movies are all copy-pasting themselves. We have a very similar plot in all of them when you really break it down. Marvel's had this issue for a while. But what makes this movie awesome is that it's a lot of fun. It's over the top, it's explosive, and it really is like a superhero haven. Seeing the JSA together, seeing their various powers were phenomenal. Pierce Brosnan brings a certain charisma to the screen where even though these actors have experience, having him there who has a few more years of experience than many other actors, he sort of is the elder statesman of not only the group of characters, of heroes, but also of the actors themselves. And he brought this sort of level of maturity and a lot of actually James Bond. I mean, he was James Bond at one point, but I mean, he brings that sort of charisma to the screen. Again, alongside Pierce Brosnan, we've also got Aldous Hodge, who plays Hawkman. Hawkman, to me, has always been lame. I've never been into Hawkman, but for the first time in my lifetime, and I haven't read a lot of the modern DC stuff, but for the first time in my lifetime, Hawkman was cool. I really like the character here. I like how badass he is, and I do like how Aldous Hodge plays him. It was effective. The issues with the film, I mentioned already, it's predictable. The villain is a bit one-dimensional, but I feel like in some cases it kind of needs to be that way for this kind of story because he's one-dimensional in the sense of he's not a three-dimensional, sort of sad story, becomes corrupt, and, he's not like a character that at one time was good. No, he's kind of a Saturday morning cartoon villain. Point blank, that's what he is. But I feel like the movie kind of needs that because when you find out, and I'm not spoiling it, but when you find out like where he got his powers from and what actually happens with him, it kind of makes sense as to why he is the way he is. It sort of makes sense, and it's like, okay, this is kind of how he should have been portrayed because he is a menace of evil. The other issue with the film is that there are some sloppy editing points. For example, later on in the film, in the third act, it feels very, very rushed. It felt like they tried to cram another hour into like 30 minutes because a lot of things happen in the third act. We have characters making sacrifices. We've got, another character coming back. We have somebody getting powered up. We have all kinds of different things going on, and it sort of felt very rushed. Overall, the movie is extremely fast-paced. This movie does not waste time. It's quick. It doesn't really give you a chance to breathe. And for better or for worse, some folks might love that, some might not. I loved it for this movie. I thought it worked. I thought that enough characters had enough development to where it was fine for me, but it definitely feels like this was a 4-hour movie, like a Snyder Cut type of thing, cut down to 124 minutes. It's barely over 2 hours, and I feel like another 30 minutes might have actually helped flesh out the characters, but it wasn't really necessary. However, it definitely was cool the way they did it, and all of the action sequences are pretty much this sort of special effects light show. Like, it really is over the top, but they really push the boundaries of what DC has done before when it comes to these kind of effects. You remember how Doctor Strange versus Thanos, how they had those kind of insane CG effects of like multiple Doctor Stranges and their powers going back and forth in Infinity War? This film does that a few different times. There's a lot of really pushing the envelope special effects, and they all look good. I mean, the movie looks and feels like a comic book. Not to mention that the DC comics are actually in universe in this film. One of the characters has a collection of DC merchandise with the DC comics, so it's kind of self-aware. Obviously, in this universe, they're marketed from the real Justice League in their universe. They're making toys out of the real heroes, but it was kind of cute how they did that, but it didn't totally go meta. It's still a fictional story, but it was good. It was a lot of fun. Very rushed. Could have done with some slowdown. I mentioned that third act. When you're going from the second to the third act, it really is super congested with a lot of stuff going on, but I don't think it ruined the movie, at least not for me. Everybody had their place in the story. Some of the other JSA characters were not really, fleshed out, but ultimately it was down to 3 superheroes and some villains and sort of their story. That's really what it came down to. I like the movie a lot. I think, yes, predictable it is. Very awesome mid-credit scene. Very awesome mid-credit scene. It's already leaked online. If you don't know what it is, if you do know what it is, you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, that's okay. It's out. And it really feels like the film is course correcting again the DC universe. I think that now with the Discovery merger, they're under new leadership. I'm not really sure how I feel about that because it's still too soon, and this film was already under production before they took over, before the Discovery thing happened. But overall, though, with the Batman, DC's had a pretty good year in theaters, yo. And I look forward to seeing what else they put out. This was a lot of fun. It's a fun movie. The best thing you could ask for is a fun ride. Somewhat of a popcorn film, but it was fun. It had some developments here and there, and the finale was, I mean, it's also very over the top and violent in a good way, but not gory. It's not like Zack Snyder violence, but it's more like Black Adam doesn't give a damn kind of violence, and I loved it. So very fun. Go see Black Adam. DC is starting to fix themselves now. Hopefully we'll have some good stuff coming from them in the future because they've been so behind Marvel, and they probably will stay behind Marvel. But Marvel has not done so well this year. They haven't done to the level they were at a few years ago. So maybe this is the beginning of a change, but I like this. So go check out the film. And this is my non-spoiler. My spoiler review will be out tomorrow here on the channel. Take care. Talk to you then.